Okay, we are live. Hello and welcome to today's web panel discussion, a look behind the scenes, internationalization and localization at Adobe and Intel. We have with us Michael Kuppenstein, Leandra Rees, and David Sommer. And guys, why don't you quickly introduce yourselves? Michael, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, let's start with me. I'm a localization engineer in a localization department at Intel. I've been writing code for about 30 years. That's right, 30 years, 3 decades. I've been practicing internationalization for about 12 years at Intel. And I see my role at Intel to help my company make worldwide software releases by improving the tools and processes and reducing time and costs to while also improving the quality of the products.
Great, thanks a lot. Leandro.
Hi everyone, this is Leandro. I've been in the globalization industry for about 22 years now. I've been with Adobe since 1996. I currently manage Adobe's World Readiness Program, which is an internal program that targets educating Adobe product teams and functional teams on internationalization. So I spend a lot of my time writing guidelines for internationalization, reviewing products and product specs, and answering questions from engineers, product managers, QA engineers from product teams, and also from engineers within my organization. Prior to Adobe, I worked with Microsoft localizing some of their products into Brazilian Portuguese. I'm glad to be here today. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar.
Great, happy to have you, Leandro and Michael. David.
Yes, my name is David Sommer. I'm the Director of Strategic Operations at NetTranslators. My main position is to assist our customers. NetTranslators is an LSP, a language service provider, and my main position is to help our customers integrate their processes with their LSP, which would be us, of course. I've been here this is my 10th year at NetTranslators. I was previously at NetTranslators, I was a project manager. And then prior to that, I worked for an international standards organization.
Excellent. Definitely some thought leaders here. Oh, and let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Chris Ralph. I don't have a picture up here. I used to be in the localization industry and internationalization industry for the last, 12 plus years. I recently started my own company, Boulder SEO Marketing. I'm very excited to be hosting or focusing this web panel. This said, let's quickly find out who we have in the audience today. So I just opened the poll. We'd like to know, are you from the customer side, the vendor side? Are you a freelance translator, an analyst, consultant, or something else? So we'll leave it open. This will definitely help us tailor our answers to the level of what kind of technicality it should be addressed. Okay, we'll probably leave it open for another 5 seconds. If you cast your vote, that would be great. We'll do 3, 2, 1, and let me close the poll here. I'll be showing the results real quick. So panel, we have 53% on the customer side, 16% on the vendor side, 5% freelance linguists, 9% consultants or analysts, and 60% others. All right. Let's do another quick poll about the seniority level of our audience. Are you new to localization? Have you been in the industry for a bit? Or are you a top-notch expert like our panel members today? All right, probably give it another 10 seconds, but it looks like we're leaning toward the intermediate to expert section. So we'll do 3, 2, 1 seconds. We're going to close that. I'm quickly going to share that with you guys. So 45% experts. Wow. 41% intermediate and about 15%, 40% more on the beginner side. This said, let's finally get started here. I'm going to hide the results. I'm going to throw the first question at Michael and Leandro. We're going to start with the first topic, how to promote a localization and internationalization department internally at companies such as Adobe and Intel. Michael and Leandro, what's involved in educating, promoting, and selling your services to other departments within your organization? How do you build relationships? Maybe address the big topic picture first.
Okay, I can go first.
Go ahead, Leandro.
So I think that it's important to differentiate the promotion and selling of the localization services from the internationalization services. In my experience, the selling and promoting of localization is a lot easier because I think product teams naturally feel that's something they want to do or they have to do in order to increase revenue, to achieve more revenue. So from what I've seen in my years at Adobe, that's something that just they just come to us asking about localization. You know, here we are, we just launched our product and we want to localize it. Can you do it for us? And we have a bunch of processes put in place to help that happen. Now, on the internationalization side, that's a bit more tricky because the average product team or the average product team member does not understand the difference between internationalization and localization. They tend to think of those as the same thing. So when I go and try and talk to a product team about that difference, I have to really invest time to educate them on the difference and explaining to them that, you know, this is something you have, internationalization is something you have to do first before you can even think about localizing. And also helping them understand the value of doing that up front and investing time and money in making that happen. So it's a bit harder on doing that on the internationalization side, and that involves the promotion and selling of that service is tightly related with education. You have to educate them on what internationalization is, which is also tied to the relationship building. When you first meet someone from a product team or when there's an acquisition and there's a new product team on board, you have to spend the time to introduce yourself and make yourself familiar to that team or those people. And I find different ways of achieving that. I try to, whenever possible, before I even meet for the first time with anybody from the product team, I try to learn as much as I can about their product and the market in which their product is being sold, their customers, so that when I go into that first meeting, I can establish that connection with them. I can show them that I cared enough about their product to spend some time learning about it, maybe even using it, installing it, and trying it out, so that it doesn't feel like I'm just a complete stranger, an outsider that is just providing services to their team or their product just like I would with any other product. Try to make them feel special. So that's how I try to establish that relationship, which again helps me with my education and promotion efforts.
Great. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things that that people can do to promote their departments internally. There's a lot of discussion about whether we should embed project managers and staff within the product development groups, or a central department who owns all the headcount for those teams. And there's several different companies have gone both either way, and it's really difficult to determine that. And I think, in my opinion, it happens to be if a product is large enough, you can embed staff within the product development groups. But if you have smaller projects, there's not enough momentum to do that. You can do our team at Intel is involved in internal development groups. We get involved in the internal social media, you know, the wikis. We get involved in technical steering committees like software development lifecycle groups, where they're talking about continuous integration and how do you embed internationalization into all of these different products. We talk about, like, there's something called the IT building codes, where it's kind of a recipe for what needs to go into IT products, what needs to go into product development teams, you know, product requirements. And we spend time reviewing reviewing the documents, making sure that there's some mention of internationalization in those, regardless of whether whether it's a product for external teams or an internal tool for, you know, maybe HR or maybe some marketing team that might be handling localized data, for example. Just make sure that everything handles Unicode properly, because once you release maybe a product on the web, maybe you have a login screen, for example, and it's out there on the web, or maybe you have a utility that will be downloaded by someone out there in the web. It's out there for everyone. It needs to be able to handle software or handle international data, regardless of whether it has been localized or not. So internationalization is really, really important for that. There was a question that was submitted by another Michael. And this was, what is the role of an internal localization group in a company? And I'm going to answer this question because it was really, really interesting to me, and it really it really answers this question really well. Personally, I see an internal localization group. It should manage localization projects and localization budgets, vendor relationships with the company as a whole, manage the central tools, the processes, possibly the terminology, and hopefully definitely the company's translation memories are being actively managed by the localization group instead of an outside vendor, or instead of across multiple different groups inside of the company. Localization teams in large companies touch so many different product teams that there's an enormous amount of influence on how to do things, on some of the processes, and how to connect the right processes and the right resources to efficiently get a product to a worldwide market.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Michael, I'm going to, Michael, if you're done with your answer, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what you just said, which I completely agree with, as far as the role of the localization of a localization team. Because of that, the wide reach that the localization team has, as you mentioned, you know, the exposure to all the different, to various areas or departments of a company, I think that provides a big opportunity for a localization team to show some leadership as well. And what I mean by that is to really show the internal customers that the localization team is not and should not be seen as simply a team that they can just throw some work over the wall to and expect them to just give something back. The localization team, in my opinion, should be seen as a team of experts, a team of folks that really understand not only the domain of localization and internationalization, but also how all that fits into how a company's products could become successful worldwide. So just it's an opportunity that I see localization teams should take on in addition to their day-to-day duties, which is what product teams usually assume we just do.
Actually, guys, can I have a question for David. David, I myself work on the customer side and the vendor side in localization. Education is huge. How often are you in a position where you need to help like your localization contact on the customer side educate their higher ups? What's your answer on that?
Well, I was sort of like nodding my head when Leandro said throwing it over the wall. I think that really describes a lot of what we get as well as a vendor. So, you know, I'm sitting here listening to Mike and Leandro and saying, wow, this is fantastic that there are companies out there that are invested and enrolled in making sure that that they're ready to go international. And the thing that comes to my mind is that they're in the minority. Most companies, when they get to the point where they're going international, they sort of, you know, they say, well, we need to get this, you know, quote unquote translated. You know, there's not even an awareness of localization, let alone the internationalization side, other than maybe making sure that everything is in Unicode. So the flagship word, the buzzword, I would say, for them is at that point compromise. Well, okay, so we won't take, you know, any extended characters for passwords. Okay, so the right-to-left issues we'll work on maybe when it becomes a little bit more immediate. Okay, so the splash screen will stay in English. Okay, so so we'll make a compromise here, another compromise here, and another compromise here, and before you know it, you're sort of, you know, you're saying, well, or the customer would be saying, you know, I invested all this money in translating. Why is it not translated? Say, whoa, wait a second. We didn't go through the very important step of making sure that you're fully internationalized, and really that could be expressed in so many different ways. And companies really have to even mature companies with localization departments and language service departments don't have a completely holistic approach to what they're doing. I remember a case where the trend today is to write fewer words and use more descriptive pictures and actions and so on and so forth. So a company was producing documentation where it was for a Class 3 medical device, and they figured, well, we'll just use pictures. But when it came to you know, right-to-left languages, they didn't take into account the fact that if they're just using pictures, the natural flow of the right to left is to go from right to left. So they're doing everything in reverse to what they were supposed to be doing. So companies really have to take a more holistic approach to this, and we spend our time sort of putting out fires like, oh, you have to do this. So that's really going back to all their documentation, making sure that all their documentation is taken care of in that way, rather than really taking a more proactive approach and saying, how do we start with the internationalization?
Yeah. Actually, can I throw in a question from the audience, and then actually we may have to move on to the next topic. A question from Adam. I see quite a few organizations struggle with initial internationalization and localization business cases. How do you support their business decisions with hard numbers and cost-focused logic or opportunities? I'm going to throw that at, let's start with Leandro.
So if I understood the question correctly, the question was how do you convince the product team of the importance of internationalizing without having the real numbers? Well, you have to find a way to be convincing and effective in selling the story. Without numbers, you have to, which are quite hard to get. By the way, I've been trying to do that for a long time at Adobe, but you know, it's internationalization is the benefits of internationalization are hard to measure. They are clearly beneficial if something is designed well. It will prevent a huge amount of problems down the line. But how can you measure those problems if you've done a good design from the get-go? You know, you won't see them. If you, let's say, accidentally did something right, you won't know that you saved a ton of money. But you could say, you could explain that, you know, if you're seeing a lot of bugs that are related to a lot of localization bugs, perhaps you can estimate the number of bugs that were caused by internationalization, you know, hard-coded strings, truncated dialogues, corrupted characters. If you have a hold of those numbers, or at least an estimate of time or an estimate of effort, you could sort of build a case and say, you know, we could do away with all this pain, all this time we're spending on this bugs, if only you could do this change in your design, or if you could architect your product differently. So even though you might not have the exact numbers, the exact dollar amounts, perhaps you could show a few cases, or maybe you could even draw examples from your customers. There might be complaints in your product forums about customers not being able to do some things. They might not be able to type their name or search a string. Try and find a few key things that illustrate the challenges of having a badly internationalized product, and bring that back to the product teams. Try and make it real for them, not just simply statistics. You know, we have 342 bugs. No, try and build a story around what you have found or what you know about your product being deficient in internationalization, and have a conversation with the product team. Try to make it real for them, what your pain is and what their pain is as well, because I'm sure they're not happy that you're going back to them, you know, asking about, have you fixed this bug? You know, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? All this could be prevented with good design and a good understanding of what having a truly global product is.
Absolutely, and we actually eased right into topic number 2, so we're on time here. How to evangelize internationalization. Michael, do you have any thoughts on this last question? Then let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, ultimately, you know, we're kind of in charge of, or we kind of have to own part of the globalization strategy, and we have to really spend a lot of time talking with the development teams to really understand what the teams are looking for, and try to act as kind of a mediator between the development teams and the vendors, and try to make sure that we're kind of the gatekeepers of quality sometimes.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question. We got a lot of small and medium-sized companies on the call here as well, and I need to apologize, we'll not get to all the questions submitted, but please keep them coming. Let's see, regarding small, medium-sized companies, what are the 2 or 3 things that you would focus on if you had a limited budget for internationalization? Michael, I'm going to throw it at you first.
Oh, spell checking. Reviewing the source content is really, really critical, and that includes just simply running a spell checker. If you're a small company, maybe you don't have the resources to, you know, get to everything, but it's really important to review the source content, and we could even talk about that in a whole a whole nother discussion topic for an hour about how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
Another important thing is to either scan the code with a code scanner or do pseudo localization. They're not perfect tools, either one of them. They reduce the overall number of issues enormously prior to localization. The really important thing is to focus on reducing issues before you get to localization, because after translation, a lot of bugs that could be found using a code scan or pseudo localization could potentially be multiplied. So, you know, if the French tester sees the same bug, they log the bug, it gets dispositioned. The German tester sees the same bug, and so on for 20 languages. That becomes very, very expensive. So if you can shortcut that ahead of time, it saves enormous amount of time and an enormous amount of money.
Absolutely. What tools do you use in your processes for internationalization?
Well, first of all, large companies are very, very complex, and pretty much almost everything that we see today, like our houses, our phones, it's all a result of extremely highly automated processes. You know, large companies are incredibly complex environments, so there's automation everywhere, absolutely everywhere that we see. So we essentially use tools for nearly every single part. I mean, we use tools for extracting resources, and building the translated files. We use tools for managing translation memories. We use machine translation for certain types of content. We use tools for scanning code, pseudo localization. We have probably half a dozen different pseudo localization scripts of various types. We use specialized spell checkers and content reviewers. We extract content into, you know, of all things, Excel spreadsheets sometimes, and do a review in Excel spreadsheet, and then send that back to development teams a lot of times. We have automated screen captures, and especially with a lot of languages, and especially if the screenshots are used in the help. Screenshots don't replace hands-on testing of a product during runtime, but many of the linguistic defects can be caught by just reviewing the screenshots. So it's a time saving. So that we essentially have invested in automation of all sorts of different types of processes.
That's great. Let me throw a question at Leandro.
Chris,
go ahead.
Chris, sorry. Actually, is it okay if I add my 2 cents to the previous question, the one that Michael just answered?
Please.
I agree with Michael's approach to this. I would just like to add that if you have a limited budget, it might be worthwhile. If you think of internationalization defects or problems as you know, an illness, pardon the grim analogy, but let's call it an illness. What Michael described are very effective treatments to that illness. So you will be able to diagnose and treat the illness and fix those issues, hopefully, and cure the patient. But I think just like with you know, human health, it would be very important to try and prevent the illness from happening in the first place. And I believe that the best way to do that in an internationalization context is to invest in good design. It's to find a way to work with product teams to embed an expert. Maybe you could invest your limited budget on hiring a globalization expert that could come up with good guidelines and engage with the product teams to ensure that they will have a good design that will ensure good internationalization, that hopefully will eventually minimize those symptoms down the road that will need treatment.
Great. And actually, let me, that
I'd like to
actually,
chime
oh,
in
go
as
ahead.
well. If I may also chime into what Michael was saying. The place where typically we would come in as a vendor generally is not at the design phase, but rather at the point where they say, okay, we have code freeze and we want to go ahead. So here we often say, listen, before we go and do anything, we just have to do a pseudo translation, because this is going to help us, like Michael said, identify places where we can really save going ahead with, especially on the testing and the reporting of the bugs. And to take that one step further, what we've recently done, for instance, and it's sort of standard operating procedure, is we can, rather than doing all the testing of the languages at once, what we'll do is we'll take a language, usually German, and do the testing of the German, because in German we can actually identify issues that are sort of across all the other languages. So rather than having an approach where we're reporting on the same bug only in a different language, so we're reporting once in the German, fixing it, and then we go out and test the remainder of the languages. So it's sort of a dual prong. First you do the pseudo, you identify what you can there, and you cut down on the amount of issues you can find. Then you go ahead and you do the localization, and then the testing comes, and where you do that in a two-prong approach as well. And we find that that saves tremendous amount of time and effort. And you know, for people who are out there wondering, well, you know, what's it going to, you know, our customers always, you know, we say, okay, go ahead and do pseudo localization. Well, you know, how much time is that going to take? How much is it going to cost? And they're so surprised to find out that it's the most effective way of identifying issues early on, both in terms of how much time it's going to take, as well as the costs are very minimal. I had the opportunity to sit in on a design meeting about 2-3 months ago with a company, and in 2 hours we solved issues that would take them, you know, 3-4 months to resolve down the road.
Absolutely. Let me,
Yeah.
oh, Michael, go ahead.
I wanna chime in one last little bit. So, in my experience, there's some projects. Actually, the bulk of the projects, almost all of the different types of projects, have a large number of really easy bugs to fix. They're easy to find, easy to fix. Embedded strings are pretty easy. There are a few projects that I have found, a small percentage of them, maybe 5% of them, that have major architectural functional defects that are so difficult to fix that they take several weeks or even potentially several months to fix, and they're product killer defects if they're not caught early. And so I would advocate that there needs to be a lot of early review. And so what Leandra was mentioning, you know, embedding teams into the user experience design is really important for some projects. But there's also this overwhelming weight of issues, to just thousands and thousands and thousands of defects that have to be taken care of. And it can take an enormous amount of weight. Either one of those types of things or issues, you know, one massive issue could potentially be take as long as several thousand of these other types of issues, depending on whether it's been dealt with or not. So maybe you only have something that I'm talking about similar. Say you have an English spell checker, but you don't have spell checkers for French, Italian, German, Spanish, etc., available for whatever your system it is, and you have to change the spell checking architecture or something like that to support all of these other languages. That's the type of like major issue that has to be fixed. You know, same thing goes with like keyboard support. If your particular keyboard vendor doesn't have the languages, you would have to go either swap out the vendor or help that vendor create those keyboards. So, you know, basically there's some of these things require early identification Otherwise, it can kill the product.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Let me actually...
I want to
okay.
actually add something to what Michael was saying about the spell check. Even if you have a spell check, there's sometimes issues that do slip on by. I'm reminded about 4 months ago. So Chrome came out with an improved spell check, and they wanted to get that message across to their users. So they had a little, balloon that popped up and said, "Try out our new Betar spell check, C-H-E-K." So I sort of thought, oh, that's a mistake. Oh, wait a second, that's not a mistake. That's an attempt at humor. And then I took it one step further, and I said, wait a second, if that's in the code and if that's going to be localized, so all the localizers are going to have to know what the target in terms of what Chrome wanted to get across to their users, that their spell checker would have picked up these things. But it's sort of like a natural thing for us to fix errors, and I wonder if there are translators out there who said, oh, I'm just going to fix it up and make it a better spell check without the humor.
Absolutely, I think that's a great example. Actually, sorry, this leads me into the next question. We have quite a few questions submitted by the audience on this topic. Should localization be involved during the source content development process, terminology management, style guides, glossaries, etc., etc.? David, I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, yeah. In one word, absolutely. I think that the localization department really should take the lead on developing all the things, all the items that would impact the quality, and all the things you mentioned are certainly going to impact the quality. The style guides, and we're not even talking about the language style guides. We could even be talking about the corporate style guides. These are all things that the localization team needs to be involved in at the very least, and if not taking the lead. In terms of the terminology management, so often we're faced with challenges on how to sell to our customers, and I'm sure that Michael and Leandra also experienced this within their companies, the importance of having a well-maintained terminology database. And I know it's not just the small companies that are suffering from this, but it's the large companies, especially companies that have grown through acquisitions, where they're challenged with, okay, how do we integrate these two products that have similar terminologies, but perhaps in their target languages, not only in their source languages, but in their target languages, are using different translations for the same thing. Wow. And managing that entire process is huge, and it needs the approach of a team that's going to look at it from the perspective of how is this going to play out in different languages.
Absolutely. And I think, Michael, I mean, for you, we spoke about this before. I think for you, you're challenged with that basically like every day, or like how do you deal with that at Intel?
Yeah, it's really tough. We struggle with essentially everything. I mean, everything is a struggle every day. I mean, on the one hand, I can look at it, the glass is half full, and we have great tools and great processes, and we're doing a pretty good job with our translation memory management. But on the other hand, I see just constant little tiny problems that are cropping up of all different types. The most common one is Excel spreadsheets that are coming through. Someone was talking about this morning. One of my colleagues was just basically telling me about this little story about an Excel spreadsheet that came through, and originally it had started out as an XML file, and we asked the development team, which was actually an outside design agency of some sort, and we asked, hey, can you like please turn these into we don't really like how these are individual words on each line. Can we make complete sentences that can be translated? And a few other things about technical about the XML. And then the next thing, a couple weeks later, we get an XML or an Excel spreadsheet file containing all of these, all of the text, and they had basically copied it out of the XML file into an Excel spreadsheet. It didn't solve the problem. It made it actually even worse because now it's non-automated. So, we struggle with these types of problems all the time, even though, a lot of our processes are very good. It's kind of, glass half full, glass half empty type of a situation here.
Absolutely. Leandro, any thoughts on this topic?
I think whenever the localization team sees an opportunity to participate in any process, any decision making early, that's an opportunity that should be taken, because I see that's where a localization team could really add value to our organization, to our company, is by showing that leadership that I mentioned earlier in this call, the capability that a localization team has or can have of providing that leadership, providing that insight, that expert insight into how to design products and processes in a way that will prevent issues from popping up later on. It's all in the design. It's how well you design things. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some echo. But that's basically my overall feeling about this particular question and any other area that may require early involvement. We should always strive to be there and participate.
Another interesting thing, I'm seeing a lot of language lists because of the complexity of some of the tools that we have or some of the products that we have multiple teams that are contributing code to single products. So you might have a dozen different software, basically software tools that get installed into a single product. And there could potentially be different language lists. And depending on which development framework is used, those language lists could potentially be different. And depending on what language interface pack or language is selected by the end user, you could see different languages depending on the product, depending on the platform that's being developed on, whether it's C++ or .NET or some other language. And so I see, we have a position potentially of leading the language selection process and making sure that we provide a really good user experience for users who across the board have all these different languages. And so we spend a fair amount of time trying to research what's the right approach and finding workarounds and asking some teams for how did they go about solving that problem. Oh yeah, okay, let's apply that across all the different software products and try to make sure that the user experience is a good user experience for everyone, and it's fairly uniform across everyone's across all the different languages for the products.
That's an excellent point.
Great, great. Actually, let's. I think we need to jump to topic number 3. How to build winning relationships with localization vendors that will eventually save time, money, and also improve the quality of the localized end products. Let me start with question 1 here. What are best practices to establish a strong and mutually beneficial relationship with a localization vendor? How do you make sure the relationship lasts beyond the first project? Leandro, please.
Okay. So I think communication is at the core of everything. I think it's really important to make sure that all the processes that are put in place will ensure that the three constraints of project management, quality, cost, and schedule, are going to be met, that they are going to fall within the expectations of the project. And the key way of making sure that happens is communication. So I think making sure that there is that first face-to-face kickoff meeting where the scope of the project is communicated, where the way the teams, the in-house localization team and the external localization vendor team will work. All those variables need to be clearly described and agreed upon on how everybody's going to work together. And again, if you have a good quote-unquote design from the beginning, or in this case the design of how the project is going to work, how the relationship is going to work, the chances are your project will be successful, and the relationship that you will have between both parties naturally will be a successful one as well, and hopefully a long-term one.
I'm going to pick David before Michael. David from the vendor side. What are your thoughts on this question?
Well, obviously, you know, Michael and Leandra are evangelizing within their own companies, and it's a pleasure to work with companies of that scale. But quite often, the companies that come to us are the smaller and medium-sized companies that don't have the discipline. So the first thing I would say is, in order to establish a good relationship, is to sort of have a mindset that this is not my translation vendor, this is my localization partner. And in the same way that Leandra and Michael head up globalization teams in their organization, so we're essentially coming in as that globalization, localization, internationalization team in your company that you're outsourcing that activity to us. And the things that we try to impress upon companies that are just getting started out are work in a very disciplined way, make sure that the communication is unencumbered by external noise. By that I mean, you know, get all the business side stuff out of the way, and then we're moving forward. We're partners. We're not your vendor anymore. We're partners because we're both enrolled in the success of that project. You know, in the same way that company doesn't want to send a product down to the market that's not really ready, we also don't want that company to send a product down to market that's not really ready. So the communication aspect is very important. The discipline aspect, get working in a very disciplined way. Don't, as you know, a lot of times companies are always looking like, oh, I have to change the vendor every year because I want to try and, you know, purchasing is trying to get us to save a couple of cents here and there. So what's happening is that nobody's ever stepping up and saying, I'm going to manage this terminology database in a very effective way. So we have recently encountered a problem where the in-country reviewers for a particular company are constantly changing the terminology. They're not deprecating it. They're just changing it. They're saying, okay, you know, I kind of feel this is a better word. Well, you know, every time you make a change, that's one change in the source, but, you know, you're going down to 32 languages, and you have maybe 500,000 to 1 million words in your legacy. Now, how are we going to deal with that change? What do you want to do? Cut now from moving forward, you know, penalize the entire TM and pay extra moving forward, or you want to go back and fix everything in your legacy TM? What do you want to do? So that discipline and the approach to being a partner with the localization vendor is very important. That's what I would say. Just, you know, be a partner moving forward and have good communication.
Great. Michael, and I'm sorry, I think we're going to have to speed up a little bit. We're already
Sure.
10. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. We have this, I'm just going to read directly from our Intel corporate values here. So we have like this one value is customer orientation, and it says listen and respond to our customers, suppliers, and stakeholders. Clearly communicate mutual intentions and expectations, and a bunch of other stuff. It's really, really clear that we want to listen, respond, communicate. It's really, really important. Communication is at the heart of it. We regularly solicit feedback within our own team about the performance of our vendors, and we also ask our internal product development customers about how we are doing. So there's regular reviews going on in every direction. So, you know, and that sort of helps. I guess I should have prefaced this by saying that many of the vendor relationships last for potentially many years in a larger company. So it's really important to establish a strong rapport and have communication all the time.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, can I ask how many vendors are you working with your division?
I honestly don't know. It's quite a few.
Okay, I would think so. Leandra, can I ask you, like, how many vendors are you working with for your division?
I don't have the exact number. That's not something I'm working currently with. I'm more on the, like I mentioned, the evangelization effort side. I know we have a couple of big, large partners that we do a lot of business with, and we've been working with them for many years. And there are some smaller ones that provide specific expertise in some languages that we also work with in some projects. But unfortunately, I don't have the exact numbers at the moment.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna, we got a ton of questions on this topic. I'm just gonna summarize a few of the questions. Some companies on the customer side have their own localization departments, which include QA, engineering, localization PMs, publishers, etc. But they also outsource some of the work. I guess we see other cases where it's better to do in-house localization or to outsource it, and what kind of tasks? You know, it's a very broad question, but maybe, Leandra, if I can first throw that at you. How is this being handled at Adobe, the mix of in-house versus outsourcing?
Okay, sure. I'll just describe what the current setup is. Over the years, we have changed the way we do things naturally. Currently, because Adobe has grown to be a relatively large company, we do have a very large number of products and documentation. So it's not feasible to do all of that work in-house or do all of that production work in-house. So we have to outsource. So a large amount of work is outsourced. We like I mentioned, we have large partners and some smaller partners that do take on a lot of that workload for us. But we did maintain a core team of folks that the primary roles in the team are we have a number of localization project managers, localization engineers. We have a dedicated internationalization QA team in one of our offshore campuses, and a number of people managers, of course, that coordinate the work of all these folks. And we have a few let's say experts or folks that have a lot of experience in globalization and localization. We have two globalization architects, I have this unique role of sort of the evangelizer, troubleshooter. I'm doing pretty much everything related to internationalization, trying to make it work at Adobe. So I work with all of these folks that I mentioned. We also have a very good team that's in charge of ensuring that machine translation is applied effectively with our products, in our products. So that's how things are currently set up at Adobe. And like I mentioned, in the past, things were done differently. So we just evolved with the growth of the company. And we believe that's the most effective way of dealing with all the workload right now.
Great. Michael, how's that handled at Intel?
Roughly the same. I would say that the structure of our team is pretty close, although the globalization is somewhat de-emphasized. I would say that we're very much on the project manager heavy side. What I found is our company has a smaller percentage of internationalization and localization professionals in comparison, proportionally smaller as in terms of the total size of the company compared to a software company, because we spend a lot of time, creating hardware and building large buildings and things like that. So we, in terms of vendor outsourcing, a long time ago we had internal translators, but we have we've been outsourcing more and more and more to scale up and up and up, essentially.
Great, great. Let me see this question first at David, and then I'd like to hear both of your opinions as well. David, what advice might you have for a company that is just starting out and does not have the setup that a Intel or Adobe has? How would you advise a company from the vendor side?
Well, I would say that if you really have to listen to the experts. If you don't have experts, if you don't have accessibility to experts, then partner with a localization provider rather than a translation provider. Partner with a localization provider and lean on their expertise and make it known to them that you're not expecting them to be just throw it over the wall, that you're expecting them to take you by the hand and help you achieve your goals of getting to those markets. And once you create that relationship, then it'll be a lot easier for you to accept their input.
Great. Let me, Michael, what's your take on that question? Any advice?
I'm going to pass in the interest of time.
Okay. Leandra, do you want to comment?
I didn't hear the question. There was some sort of snafu with my phone, but I heard the answer. I heard the answer from David, and I will agree with him. I think that an expert, the help of an expert, is very worthwhile because it can save you time and money in the long run.
Absolutely. We're actually at the top of the hour. Why don't we take one, maybe two more questions at the most? There's a good one. Why do localization projects fail? One of you wants to share an example of failure? Yeah. Go ahead.
We've had a few failures. Two large failed projects come to mind, which could be, I guess, partially attributed to a failure of internationalization. One had some internal sorting issue and just an overwhelming number of internationalization defects. And it was just such a crushing weight of the number of defects and also some really major sorting defects because of the way I was sorting things internally. It wasn't Unicode enabling, it wasn't using Unicode collations. And another product was a little bit similar. It was a large distributed client-server system, and it just had this enormous, overwhelming weight of so many defects that had been baked in over many years of English-only development that it was almost too much to undo to make it internationalized. So in the end, failure to internationalize can kill projects.
Yeah. Leandro, is that your experience as well?
Yes, that's been my experience as well, and I'm just going to define, in my definition, a project failure is a project that does not meet the schedule, it's late, and I've had the displeasure of being in a couple of those earlier in my career at Adobe, precisely because of what Michael said, the overwhelming amount of bugs and extra work that was unveiled mid-project or towards the end of the project was simply too much to handle, and we had no option but to postpone the ship date, which eventually we shipped. So Adobe made the additional revenue, so it wasn't a complete failure, but within the expectations we set out in the beginning, we were late, and internationalization defects were at the core of that, because everything else we had prepared for. We had a good team, we had a good partner, everybody was working very professionally, but when you are hit with an unexpected amount of extra work, it's just impossible to handle. So
yeah.
Same experience.
David, have you seen localization projects fail, and why?
Well, again, I have to go with what Leandro says, where he says that not hitting a deadline is a fail. Well, in like anything else, you really do have to determine what's a fail. So for Leandro, missed deadline's a fail, but there could be other types of failures that other people determine as failures. For instance, if you've chosen to go to a market and you don't have penetration to that market because of a poor localization job, then I would say that that's a failure. If you don't understand your target market, then that's a failure as well. And too often we see, just translations rather than a real type of approach to the market. When we were talking yesterday, preparing for this, so Michael said, we have to come up with some sort of a witty sort of story, and I said, okay, that's my job, and I forgot. No, I didn't forget, but I didn't put it at the beginning. But I think that the story though really shows you how localization can fail, and how markets may or may not be forgiving. And so where did I go for my localization humor? Where else do you go for localization humor but the New York Times? So there was a story about, and this is sort of like an old story about Jimmy Carter, where he had a non-native interpreter when he went to Poland, and the interpreter listened to what Carter was saying, and he translated what he had said into the equivalent of "I desire the Poles carnally." So that was, quite embarrassing. But the follow-up to that was that Carter went then, after he left office, he went to give a speech at a college in Japan, and he told this same story, and it was followed with this tremendous uproar of laughter. People were rolling in the aisles, and then he was perplexed as to why that joke had gotten such an amazing response in Japan. So his interpreter said, well, President Carter, I told the audience that President Carter told a funny story, everyone must laugh. So essentially that sort of points at, well, where our approach to the localization, to the internationalization, to the translation really has to be in such a way where you take a holistic approach and you say, what do I want to achieve in that market for that market? Obviously, Carter wanted to achieve a laughter. He got his laughter, but it didn't really achieve for that market what he was trying to do for that market. So that would be a failure, even though on the surface it looks like it was a success.
Great, great. All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. You know, we have so many questions that we can answer at this point. If maybe the panelists are up for doing a part 2 sometime before the end of the year, I think that'd be awesome. We have our next panel or webinar planned tentatively for September 10th. So make sure to connect with the Net Translators on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatnot to learn about upcoming events. If you need help with your localization, their website is Net Translators, net-translators.com. I would like to thank Michael, Leandra, David. That was awesome. Any last thoughts? Let's make it real quick, and then everybody who registered for this panel will receive the recording. Michael, I'm going to throw it at you first.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks so much for inviting me. This has been fun. Really interesting to see a lot of different viewpoints from the other panelists.
Great. Leandra?
Thank you for having me here. I was impressed by the number and the quality of questions from the audience. And I was also very glad to hear the insights from Michael and David as well. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me here. And good job, Chris, and running the show.
Thank you. David, last thought.
My last thought is thank you to you and to the audience or participants or however we're supposed to call them. I don't know the right localized word for it.
Great. I had a blast. We'll hopefully see everybody soon again. Thanks a lot, guys. Talk soon, huh?
Bye-bye.
Bye.